All right, guys, back on Southeastern 16 with Max Barr previewing the other games on Tuesday night in SEC basketball. We did preview the top, 15-ish type matchup. We're recording this before the AP poll comes out, so I don't know exactly where A&M will be. We know Auburn's number one, but a big showdown between the Tigers and the Aggies. We previewed that in a separate video, so you want to check that out, you can. Preview the other four games on a loaded Tuesday night slate. Times on these are pretty interesting because there is a triple header on the SEC network, which given the windows of time sometimes needed for these games, I don't know if the 2-hour window is going to work out too well. But we're going to start at 5 p.m. Central with Georgia hitting the road and playing South Carolina. 5 p.m. Central, yes, on the SEC network. Triple header begins with this one. And as we've noted, Max, in previous videos and live streams, this is a pretty big one for Georgia, just as it was for Arkansas heading into Columbia. We saw what happened in that game. The Gamecocks took it to the Hogs, led by 35 in the second half. Meanwhile, Georgia had one of those kind of games last week where they led by 26 in the first half against Florida. Wound up winning that game. That probably punched Georgia's ticket for now into the NCAA tournament, but not official yet. I think my thought is, Max, Georgia needs to win this one to secure their bid. Maybe if wild things happen elsewhere, they may need to do a little bit more, but I think this is the big one for the Bulldogs, and now they go play a South Carolina team that, quite frankly, I guess if you just remove the losses in some of these, one of the most consistent teams at home this season in the SEC have the Gamecocks been.
They have. And real quick, I'll start with a little note from our guy Bart. When you filter SEC ratings just for the month of February, South Carolina up at 70th in the nation, a bit higher than their season ranks. Georgia, 20th in the nation. They have been much better over the past 4 weeks than their season ranks. Bulldogs are playing their best basketball at the right time. A lot of that has to do with Mr. Silas Demery just playing lights out lately. He is the rock of this team, and it'll be interesting to see how the guards match up against South Carolina. Georgia should have a good height advantage on most of the guard matchups. It'll be interesting to see who Zachary Davis covers for South Carolina. Does he draw Demery and you get a little bit more length on him, or is he out on the perimeter on Blue Cane trying to take away those 3-pointers? Silas Demery going to need to play a full, complete game here on the road against a South Carolina team that has given a lot of squads trouble.
Georgia answered some of our questions about their play on the road with a big win at Texas, won by 16 in that game. First time around, these two teams played in Athens on January 28th. Georgia led from start to finish, won that game by 11. And, in terms of the numbers, probably played out exactly as you would expect it. Georgia, we mentioned, good defensive team. They forced 17 turnovers that first time around. And, Colin Murray-Boyles had his with 18. Jamari Thomas had 19. And that was kind of your, production for South Carolina in that one, in terms of, kind of how it played out that time around. You had pretty balanced scoring from Georgia. And I think, again, you would think this is the same kind of stuff here. It's just for Georgia on the road. We said there have been some pretty tough games. That was their first SEC road win of the season. And it wasn't just that they were losing some of these games, that some of them were not close in some instances here. But they were tough road games. And I think, again, this one probably classifies as a tough road game. And I think that's where you mentioned just kind of the matchup itself. I mean, to me, it's still one where look at what South Carolina is doing at home, and you just can't take their splits, percentages for the entire season and just use those. You really have to go to the home splits. And I think that's where, when you look at Georgia's road splits, I'm curious to see what the spread is on this one, because I think there would be some people that may even consider thinking that South Carolina may be the favorite here.
Oh, yeah. When you look at the matchup, you see some reasons why. South Carolina, number one in the SEC in defensive rebounding. They do not let you get extra opportunities. This is a Georgia team, not really the best shooting team. If they're not making their shots, they're not going to be getting too many second chances. This is a very good defensive rebounding team. The other thing, Blake, over the last 4 weeks, if I asked you, who has the highest free throw rate in the SEC over the last 4 weeks? Me personally, I would probably think of Missouri and A&M ahead. I would probably say Alabama might be ahead. Wrong on all of them. South Carolina, over the past
No.
4 weeks, got the highest free throw rate. If you want to take it into the whole entirety of SEC play, second in the SEC in free throw rate. South Carolina does two things very, very well. They do two things very well. They get to the free throw line, and they defensive rebound. That is a recipe for success at home. That's why they've been so hard to beat in Columbia.
Picks.
I am 2 for 2 on picking South Carolina to win games. I got a good feel on this South Carolina team. Georgia been playing some of their best basketball, probably their best basketball of the season. If you want to go back to the St. John's early trip, the neutral floor trips, you could qualify that. But man, a win over Florida, a road just eye test, very nice eye test win at Texas. Georgia is playing some great basketball. It's going to be a tough game on the road. I think the season is on the line, though, and I think this may be a spot where everybody jumps on South Carolina at home. Look at what they're doing at home. Look what they're doing. Too many people are in on the Gamecocks. Give me Georgia. Season on the line. Bulldogs get it done.
Yeah, you have been 2 for 2 on the Gamecocks. I've not followed your lead on those, but this time around, I'm also not going to follow your lead because I'm going to go towards South Carolina, although I hesitate picking them because when you don't pick them to win, it's tough. But I do. I look at the way they've been playing. This is a place that historically Georgia has not had a lot of success in Columbia. They did win the game there. What was it? Last year, wasn't it? 23-24, yeah. They won that game on the road 74-69, but before that, they had lost quite a few games in a row in Columbia. Every season's different. I get that, but I don't know. We just saw South Carolina do this against Arkansas. I don't think Georgia's going to play that bad, but this feels like a couple possession type game, and I've seen South Carolina play a lot of those this season, and I've seen them lose some, but I've seen them also play better in the recent games and win them, going away against two other bubble teams. So I'll pick South Carolina in this matchup. Although I think, again, I think Georgia needs to win this to lock up their bid, but
yep.
I worry that may be something where we're going into the final, game slate or even the first round of the SEC tournament trying to figure out who else is going to join the party here, but we'll see how it goes. All right, LSU at Kentucky, 6 p.m. Central on ESPN2. LSU, we said, despite their 3-13 record, they've not been playing bad basketball recently, and now they play a Kentucky team that we keep calling it. I mean, they're just back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. If you play the trends, Kentucky should win this game because, the last 3, win at Tennessee, lose at Texas, beat Vanderbilt, lose at Alabama, beat Oklahoma, lose to Auburn. So it should play out in Kentucky's favor here. We know Jackson Robinson now out for the year for the Cats. You would expect everyone else to be ready to go, minus Kirk Reese, I assume. But, yeah, so back in Rupp, usually a good spot for the Cats.
Past 3 road games, for LSU. Against Mississippi State in Starkville, they lost by 12, but were winning at halftime. The road game before that, they won at Oklahoma. The road game before that at Arkansas, they were winning at halftime. Ended up losing. Past 3 home games, they either won the game or they were winning at halftime and then lost it in the second half. This is, as good as we've been saying LSU has been playing on the road, they've still been pretty dang good. They have not really had a bad, just stinker of a road game in weeks. So have that in consideration. But when you look into the matchup here, I think the Cats have a clean offensive game here. I don't think there's too much LSU can do defensively at this point in the season where they don't defensive rebound. They might keep you off the free throw line, but other than that, there's really not too much this LSU team is going to do to make Kentucky frustrated, Blake.
Yeah, and I think that's where if you let Kentucky run their stuff, we've said they're one of the best out there when they can do that. And, maybe some of those teams that you would think frustrate them a little bit, usually are the teams that frustrate them, and the teams you don't think will, like an LSU, like you said. I think there's not a lot there from a rebounding perspective. They're not going to force a ton of turnovers. So you do feel like if Kentucky comes out and just runs their stuff here, you would think this is an opportunity to put up some points. And I think that's my biggest concern for LSU is that aspect, plus also the aspect of how many points does LSU put up here. Because we've said it. I mean, Kentucky, sure, defensively, at times, we know what that can look like. When you just kind of look at the defensive numbers and such, and sure, they've given up some points. There's no question about it. And they're also a team that's not going to force many turnovers. So LSU will get an opportunity to run their stuff. But it's just not really been a team, I think, this season that, again, outside of the Cam Carter just going off sequences, they don't seem to have that next gear offensively. And we've kind of said that. And maybe that's where, of course, losing a Jalen Reed. We've seen Jordan Sears do it some. We've seen some other guys have some of those games. But we've seen a lot more of them for Kentucky, right, where it's even with the injuries, we've seen a lot more guys step up and have big offensive games, and that's where I just don't know where LSU can sort of stop them defensively because, again, we try to base this on the matchups, and it seems like there are just so many things for Kentucky based on how they run their offense versus an LSU team defensively that doesn't really have that statistical profile of a team that gives Kentucky issues.
And unless LSU is really knocking down all their shots, I don't see how they slow down Kentucky, too. I feel like it's going to be that faster-paced game. Believe it or not, LSU shoots more three-pointers than Kentucky. It might surprise you, but LSU actually ranks number one in the SEC in three-point attempt rate. The amount of three-pointers compared to their total field goal attempts, they are taking the most amount of threes out of every team in the SEC. They're only shooting 29.8%, though. That's the problem. Shooting a lot, not making a lot, and then they're not offensive rebounding. Lost probably one of their better offensive rebounders in Reed. So you combine that, the long rebounds, maybe some transition for Kentucky. That's where they thrive. Their shooters just get to their spots immediately. Blake, I know there's no Jackson Robinson, and I know LSU has really been playing some of their better basketball. I just think this sets up real nice for the Cats. I'll get to picks. I'm going Kentucky here. I think this is a real nice setup for them.
Yep, matchup game for me too. I think Kentucky is the pick, and I think it's just a good matchup on paper between these two teams. Games aren't played on paper, though. We'll see how it plays out. But I like the spot for Kentucky, especially in a bounce back at home after the Auburn game. All right, Texas at Mississippi State, 7 p.m. Central on the SEC Network, or 7:30 p.m., depending on when this one maybe begins on your screen. But obviously, setup's pretty simple here. Texas has to win this game. I think they're in that mode now where they have to win. And, I think that's kind of the spot they're sitting in. They're 5-11 in the SEC. Last home game on Saturday against Oklahoma, but I think this is the one that really moves the needle for them in terms of if they get into the NCAA tournament, it's going to come via probably a win in Starkville. The problem is they're going to be probably a 6 or 7 point underdog. Maybe in this game, Mississippi State has been playing better at home recently after the games where we had kind of shaking our head at the back-to-back losses to Missouri and Florida. Beat A&M by 16, beat LSU by 12. So they've been playing better. There's always a chance that Josh Hubbard's going to go off. There's always a chance that Trey Johnson's going to go off. So what is the set the line on this one that both Josh Hubbard and Trey Johnson score 30 or more. I like that bet.
Yeah, you're right. Mississippi State has been playing better at home, and you look at who they beat, Texas A&M and LSU, both of them by double digits, so it hasn't been like they just squeak one out. They've looked pretty good. Blake, I've been pulling on the Torvik February ranks, just how the teams have been playing over the last 4 weeks. Texas is dead last in the SEC over the last 4 weeks on the analytics. Their offense is 58th. Defense 170th. That defense has really fallen back. They rank over the last 4 weeks, they rank 358th out of 364 teams in defensive free throw rate. They are fouling at one of the highest rates in the entire nation right now. And This is a Mississippi State offense that doesn't really lean on that, but at home, you can just bake that in a little bit more. Mississippi State probably, in most cases, we wouldn't talk about them crushing the free throw battle. They probably do here at home.
Yeah, I think that's the case too. And I think to me, it's just what do you get from Texas here? Because like we said, yes, they have the motivation level of a team that needs to make the tournament and has to win to make it. But they've had that same motivation level for the last 3 games, and they lost
Yep.
at South Carolina by 15, lost that overtime game at Arkansas, and then they lose at home by 16 against Georgia. Is this where we see Texas just sort of that you may it becomes pretty clear that motivation level is not where it needs to be, and they're maybe fighting for their coach, just knowing the rumors that are going to be out there, what happens if they don't make the tournament, all this other stuff, or do they come in and Mississippi State jumps out to a 15-2 lead, and it's kind of that's it from there. That's what I'm curious about, because I could see it playing out multiple directions here based on, like you said, Texas doing the splits that they're last in the SEC over the past little bit. So that's a problem, I think, for the Longhorns heading into this matchup, because like we said, Josh Hubbard can go off at any time, but you mentioned too the free throws and those kind of things. I mean, can Texas answer the physicality that we know Mississippi State's going to play with, the ultimate bully ball captain, Cam Matthews? We can get to picks, because you can probably tell in my voice where I'm leaning here just based on recent performance.
Be interesting to see if Tremont Mark plays. He missed the last game.
Yep.
The last 4 games he's played, 6 points, 7 points, 2 points, 26 points against Kentucky. Just had the crazy game. He's been so up and down, didn't play. So if he doesn't play, there's another angle. And what's drawing me even more towards this pick here of Mississippi State, what's their Achilles heel, their biggest weakness? The perimeter defense. This is a Texas team that barely shoots threes, and when they do, they're not making a ton. I don't think it's a Texas team built to take advantage of Mississippi State's weaknesses. Give me the Bulldogs.
Yep, you went where I was going to go. Texas 9 of 26 at Arkansas, 35%, 5 of 16 at South Carolina for 31%. 9 of 25 at Vanderbilt, 36%, and you kind of keep going into some of these kind of games, right? And sure, there's the outliers like an LSU, they go 10 of 21 and all that, but I don't think you can expect that consistently, because like you said, it's more of a volume type thing that they don't really necessarily have, and if you can't exploit that weakness from Mississippi State, especially on the road, I think that's a problem. So pick Mississippi State too in this one. All right, now we go to this game, and yes, I'm game time correct here. Arkansas at Vanderbilt, 9 p.m. Central tip-off on the SEC Network. Depending on how long those first 2 games are, you may not see this game till 9:30 Central or later. A late tip in Nashville. But another game with plenty on the line here as we look at it from Arkansas's perspective. I don't think there's a whole lot on the line for Vanderbilt anymore, except from a seeding perspective. I think the Commodores are in. I've said that many times now. They've won 3 in a row with wins over Ole Miss, Texas A&M, and Missouri. That should be enough, is enough to get them into the NCAA tournament. Now they're playing for that higher seeding, which in my opinion, they can get up to a 7-ish type seed or so, depending on how the rest of the season plays out this week with games against Arkansas and at Georgia. Meanwhile, for Arkansas, you've got to make up for the wrong, which is that game in South Carolina where they lost by 19. They were in the field for most people heading into that game. Now, a little bit trickier. They may still be in the field, but I guarantee you they're no higher than Dayton based on a loss like that. So for Arkansas, Max, it becomes, once again, a week where at worst you've got to be 1-1. Right? I mean, you can't be 0-2. You've got to win one of these games. I think, again, to feel like going in the SEC tournament, you're sitting there with a shot. And this is probably, the biggest one of the group, because the home game against Mississippi State, it's a big game. But showing you can go win on the road, which is not something Arkansas has done since that win at Texas on February the 5th, would be a big thing, especially in a building where the Commodores, as we've seen, have just been really tough to beat.
Yeah, so we've had 2 games without a Adu Thero. And the home game against Texas, the crowd shows up, big support from Bud Walton. Arkansas shoots 53% from 3, shoots 31 free throws compared to Texas's 13. They win in overtime. Trey Johnson had a fantastic game. You're thinking, is that sustainable without Thero? Those numbers, they go on the road to South Carolina, shoot 13% from 3. They only shoot 6 more free throws. Things even out a little bit, and you see that result. Blake, I was hand up. I was ranking Arkansas middle of the SEC. I was all in on the Hogs Sweet 16 run, but with no Thero, man, they were already shorthanded, and that was the heart and soul, the physicality, the backbone of that team. I am worried about the Hogs without Thero.
Yeah, Arkansas is, I think, again, my math's always a little off at times. I think Arkansas is 6 of 41 from three in their last two road games at South Carolina and at Auburn. 3 of 19 against Auburn, 3 of 22 against South Carolina. That's not ideal, and I think that's where I'm curious to see what Vanderbilt does from a defensive standpoint here, because again, if you feel like we're kind of back to that zone we were in earlier in the season, where you just are not trusting Arkansas to make shots from the perimeter, I think defensively for Vanderbilt, that becomes something where that's been their biggest weakness, right? We talked about just the Mississippi State Texas angle. For Vanderbilt, they're still last in the SEC. They're not allowing the 41% anymore, but they're still allowing teams to shoot 40%, 39.7 to be exact, from three. And so if you feel like, okay, that negates sort of one of our weaknesses, then how do we defend? Because, again, Vanderbilt defensively, if you didn't realize it, they're still last in the SEC in defensive efficiency in conference play. But, again, do we trust this Arkansas team without a Thero to open up the offense enough? Because he was someone who could do that, right? Based on the different ways he could score, it allowed teams to defend them in a certain way where it opened up for this guy or that guy, right? And that's where you get, a situation where, John L. Davis has more looks, DJ Wagner has more looks, those kind of things. And so I think that's going to be really interesting here for me to see how Vanderbilt defends in this game, just because if Thero's off the court, the way you match up, I don't want to say it becomes easy, but it becomes easier than if he was on the floor. And I think that's where, knowing you have a team like Arkansas who statistically does not shoot the ball well from outside, especially on the road, then that gives Vanderbilt a few more advantages in terms of how they can match up here.
Yeah, you nailed exactly where I was going to go. Another angle that I'm looking at here for the Vandy side of things is they have been a team that has fouled, and they have been in foul trouble. And like we said last time, right, they were okay. They brought in J.Q. Roberts, and Byington just did his wizardry and coached through it, and they got through. With Thero out, you can kind of wipe away Arkansas's free throw numbers on the season. They were a team that could consistently get there without him. I don't trust them as much to get downhill and get to the free throw line, so that helps Vandy defensively. The other angle I'm looking at for Vandy defensively is forcing turnovers. This is an Arkansas team, obviously now led by DJ Wagner. Wagner's the only guy on the team with a positive assist to turnover ratio. He had a great February. You had a few games against Kentucky, 8 assists, 1 turnover. Against Alabama, 9 assists, 2 turnovers. So he had some really, really good games. The past few games, no assist, 4 turnovers against South Carolina, 5-5 against Texas, 3-3 against Missouri. Hasn't really been that ultra efficient playmaker that he was in early February. Teams have kind of clamped down on that, a little bit more film on the Boogie Flandless Hogs. And I think the offensive efficiency numbers are coming back down to earth here for Arkansas. I'm going to go Vandy here, Blake.
Yeah, I'm going to go Vandy too. I just think that we've seen what they've done in that building. They've worked the magic, and it seems to be okay for them. And I think that's what's interesting. You look at these home games that Vanderbilt has won, right? They beat South Carolina by 3, Tennessee by 1, Kentucky by 5, Texas by 8, Ole Miss by 5, and then Missouri in overtime by 4. Played a lot of close games at home. And, if you're like, well, you play all those out however many times, they probably lose a couple of those, but they haven't. And I would think this will be another close game, maybe, depending on which Arkansas shows up here. And if it is, then I think it's like, how can you not give that edge to Vanderbilt based on they just always find a way to win these close games at home, seemingly. So, yeah, I'm going to pick the Commodores, too, in this spot.
Nice.
All right. That means if these work out the way we picked them in some of these spots, it's going to be an interesting bubble Saturday in the SEC. Yep. If it plays out this way, but we'll find out. All right, speaking of bubbles and brackets, of course, our friends at BracketBids. You can take your college hoops experience to the next level with BracketBids this March here. Enter into the free pick'em contest or start an auction draft league with your friends, family, or coworkers. Everyone starts with the same bidding dollars. Up to you to outwit and outbid your league mates. Secure the teams you think go the distance. Choose from multiple scoring models, including the upset bonuses. To reward the bold picks, track your teams with live in-game scoring. Watch the standings shift in real time. The further your teams advance, the higher you climb the standings. For league play, use that promo code SE16 for 40% off. SE16, 40% off. Download the BracketBids app today or visit them at bracketbids.com. All right, guys, we appreciate you watching. As always, we'll have our reaction to these games most likely, I would think, on Wednesday morning. We may do some on Tuesday night, depending on how those early games go, because it is kind of a weird slate, like we said. You got 5 games, and they start early. You got a late game. We'll play it out, as we always do here at Southeastern 16. We appreciate you guys watching. Subscribe, hit the like button, turn on notifications. We'll talk to you soon at Southeastern 16.